think we're okay. I'll wait for chat to tell me that we're okay, and then I'll explain why we're 3 minutes late. But 3 minutes, I think people can live with being 3 minutes late.
No, we got to run on schedule.
All right, looks like we are live. Are we live, chat? Can you guys hear me, see me? Everything's great?
I don't know.
Can you guys hear me, see me? Everything's great? Okay, yeah, we're good to go. All right, hi guys. How's it going? My name is Adam. I am one of the co-founders of System Era. I'm also one of the artists working on Astroneer. If you've been following us on Twitch, you may have seen me do some streams before, and you may have also heard a couple of the other fellows that are on here with me. With me on this stream today, we have two programmers and our audio designer. The first programmer that we have with us is Brendan Wilson. And Brendan focuses a lot on multiplayer and a lot of back-end stuff. I think you're a tools programmer by trade. Is that right, Brendan?
Systems and engine programmer, although I have done a couple years of tools programming.
Okay, perfect. And then we also have with us Zabir, who's our latest hire at System Era. And Zabir, why don't you mention what you're up to and what you focus on? And
Sure. Well, at System Era, I'm kind of filling in wherever we don't have engineering support. So lately, it's been a lot of optimizations. In the past, I've been a graphics programmer at 343, and most recently at Epic Games. But yeah, I've done a lot of engine programming and tools and file systems and all over the place. So at System Era, I try to wear many hats in terms of areas that I try to help out on the programming side.
And last but not least, Riley Gravatt. You guys have seen him on the stream with me before.
Hey, how's it going? I do sound things and such.
Riley's our sound master. He cut our trailers, directed our trailers. He's a great guy to have with us and do all those fancy things. So, today's stream is going to be a short one. It's going to be anywhere between 60 and 90 minutes. We have a lot of work on our plates, so we can't spend too much time today streaming. But we wanted to do take a chance to sort of talk about a lot of the common issues that we see posted on the Steam forum, on the System Era forum, and just kind of give you guys an idea of what we are doing to sort of work on them, get them done, and sort of talk about them item by item, really, and then go through and expose, are these easy things for us to fix? Are they difficult? Are they going to take time? And also to sort of talk about what's going on with those bugs and why are they happening. And to do that, I'm actually going to join Brendan's game. So I'll go ahead and do that now really quickly.
So we might start out with getting a lot of bugs already because, yeah, I've been expanding the base quite a bit, and there's a lot of tether lines, and let's just see what happens.
It's going to be completely perfect. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
So, for those of you that have played multiplayer, you may have noticed that being the client, where you connect to a friend's computer, tends to be probably more performant than your friend is experiencing, but you probably also experience a lot more issues. So that's why I'm going to be a client this time, just so that we can kind of face some of these issues head on. As you can see in the top left, I'm already on the planet. I can see Brendan's home base there, and I'm going to go ahead and take off.
So, yeah, there's already a bad one.
Good. So I think one of the things that we can talk about while I land here, and I think it's probably one of the more common things we especially get emailed on, and this would be a good way to sort of jump into bugs, is Brendan or Zabir, can you guys talk about that C++ redistribution error that we get? Because there's a lot of people that are sort of hitting there. What's going on? How do we fix it?
Yeah. Okay. I can take that one.
Sure.
So I guess I'll give a little bit of background as to why this error even comes up. So we are using the Unreal Engine, and a lot of the game is coded in C++. And when you code the game in C++, there are C++ is the language that we use to tell the computer how to run the game and everything. It relies on certain components that the operating system provides, in this case Windows. We use a development environment called Visual Studio 2015. This is built by Microsoft, and there are two components to this. One component we ship with the game itself. And this seems to be, for the most part, not the part that's been causing issues. It's the second part, which is a component that's that's considered an OS component, meaning that the OS is supposed to provide this piece. So essentially, they're kind of two pieces that are supposed to go out. One comes down through Windows Update, that's the OS component part, and then the other part is the game's. It's the component that ships with the game. Both need to be there in order for the game to actually run. What happens is that for some reason or another, whether you're just behind on Windows updates or there's a Windows error and the Windows update is failing, but for some reason the OS component fails to install into the computer. And what the game thinks it's doing is that it only has its side of the equation. And so it futilely tries to put in that component over and over, thinking it's the one that's at fault. Really, the issue is that the OS component is missing, and the Windows update is generally the way we expect that component to get there on your system. But for various reasons, folks don't have that OS component, and the game, tries it might, will not be able to install that component by continually rerunning the installer. So really, the problem is, the Visual C++ runtime has two components: an OS component and a client-side component. It's the OS component that seems to be missing from some folks' computers. We are estimating that the percentage of the population that's kind of affected by this is probably in the order of like maybe 2%, 2 to 3%.
Okay.
We do have a lot of users, and so that ends up appearing as though we have a lot. We're trying to figure out the best way to try and get those components distributed, but yeah, that's kind of the general summary of the problem.
Okay, so just to because I'll explain it like in 5, because that's kind of what I need on my end to understand these things. Is that there's two parts to this. One part we're sort of shipping with the game, and that comes installed with it. The other part is a requirement from the version of the operating system that somebody's running. It sounds like it's mostly Windows 8, Windows 7 users. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, Windows 10 for the most part, because of the way they've been updating it. You're pretty much guaranteed to have it. It's Windows 7 and Windows 8 are the most affected, particularly Windows 7. I think just because there's a larger user base on Windows 7. For instance, like Service Pack 1 is a prerequisite to this component being there, right? So if you have chosen for whatever reason not to go to Service Pack 1, you'll just not have this component at all on your machine. Right?
Okay. Great. So that makes sense. So what are we doing to sort of resolve that? Is there any sort of timeline that people can expect? Because like we said, there is a nominal amount of people affected by this, but we want to sort of address it, obviously, because we want as many people to be able to play our game as possible. I'm not saying it's going to be done by this date, but is it something that is a quick turnaround? Does it require a lot of investigation on our part? Is there even a solution that we can do for it?
So unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot of solutions directly that we can do. One of the approaches that I tried, and some folks may have seen it on the forums, is I tried to package in the particular Windows updates that users may have been missing. It turns out that there's just far too many scenarios and different Windows updates for us to be able to just package in everything and make sure that you always get the component. The other thing to note is, I guess, we're not the only ones that are affected by this. If you do search for that error, you'll see various other games. I even came across Microsoft Office users sometimes hit this as well. So we're trying to reach out to some of the experts at Microsoft and try to get some advice from them as far as what's the best way to try and handle the problem. Right now, still the best course of action seems to be is try and get all your Windows updates installed. If your Windows update is just like spinning and hanging and not actually, saying that, hey, I got the new updates and you're fully up to date, it just indicates that there is a more fundamental error on your Windows installation.
Okay.
But yeah, Windows Update is kind of the best thing we have right now, and yeah, we're reaching out to Microsoft to try and see what advice they have for us.
Okay, great. Thanks, man.
Mm-hmm.
So just a little bit of housekeeping on my end really quickly. There's a lot of questions that are coming through the chat right now, which is great, and we love to be able to answer those. But just because we have a short amount of time, like I said, we are very busy. I probably won't get to a lot of questions there unless they are very specific about bugs. So if you're asking us about whether or not we're hiring, which we are, I can answer that really quickly. Yes. And maybe Yvarius or one of the mods can drop a link in there for the jobs page. But we really want to streamline this and make this bug focused, and I think that that's what we'll continue to do. So if I don't get to your question, it's not that I'm completely ignoring you. We just have to sort of focus on this so that we can run through it. I do have a bug that actually maybe Brendan can touch on really quickly, and this is somewhat of a trivial one. It's not that much of a game breaker, but what happens, and I'm looking at it right now on my stream so the viewers can see this. What's going on when there's like seams in the terrain where I can kind of see through and down into the dirt? What is that? What's happening there, and what's some of the solutions that we might be working on?
There's kind of two separate problems that can happen. What are you looking at right now? Is it like a gaping giant hole? Or
It's not a giant
seam?
hole. It's just a little tiny seam, and as I deform the terrain, it kind of resolves itself.
Yeah. So what's often happening there is what I like to call a slight non-determinism issue. There is so the game, as you know, is completely procedurally generated, which means that none of the geometry, none of the positions of the vertices of the triangles are baked into any content beforehand, and so we have to run a whole series of essentially mathematical processes that produce the exact positions of all the triangles and all the actor placements on the surface. And this has to, in order to see completely identical results across multiple machines, you have to have exactly the same thing happen on everyone's machines. And what you can see happen in multiplayer sometimes is that you'll have a minor seam appear between two segments of the terrain.
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking at.
What's happened there is that the host has generated it one way, and you as the client have generated it slightly differently.
Okay.
And when you deform the terrain, and normally you wouldn't actually see that. You wouldn't see any seam in that case. You would just see it the way you generated it, and the host would see it the way the host generated it. And that in itself is a problem. The fact that they're slightly different. And I can talk about that a little bit later, why those things can happen. But the reason that you end up seeing the seam is that when you deform, we run a process to actually check consistency between the host and the client.
Okay.
And we'll detect that you're different, and that happens as soon as you start changing the terrain with your deform tool, and in that case, we will actually, the host will gather up the data, the underlying voxel data for the terrain, and compress it and send it to the client. And as the client, you'll unpack it and you'll regenerate the terrain for that segment, which will now exactly match what the host sees. The problem is you now have a segment that matches how the host generated it, but the neighboring segments, which we haven't transmitted yet, are still the way you generated them. So on that border region, you're going to get a slight discrepancy. You're going to get a hole opening up. Mm-hmm. And the way that we need to resolve that is to make sure that all machines really do always generate it exactly the same way.
Right.
And so there's not a major determinism issue, because if there was, you would see the whole planet being completely different. You'd see like landscapes being drastically changed. Mm-hmm. A mountain in one place where it isn't on the host or something. We see very minor differences, and that is could be a combination of things that can sometimes cause that. It could be differences in processor architecture and the way that they treat floating point numbers, and what happens to round off errors. That could happen in theory between something like the Xbox and the PC, Intel and AMD hardware. It used to happen in differences between Intel and old PowerPC hardware and stuff like that. And then the other thing is there could be because a lot of the operations are very multi-threaded. The order in which some operations happen on different machines is going to change, and that could affect perhaps some memory buffers, which should probably be consistent and cleaned out, but might have some leftover data from a previous calculation, which then gets incorporated into the result of the next one, and can change the result depending on the order in which things happen. Okay. On the CPU. So we have to kind of go in and track those down very carefully, and it's going to require just a tremendous amount of data gathering to see exactly where things diverge as all these processes happen.
Okay, that's a good explanation, I think. And you kind of touched on, and there's a lot of sort of issues that come up on this, and this might be a great segue for us. Is you sort of touched on just the fact that there is inconsistencies between client and host, and sort of what's involved in. Oh shoot! I hope I didn't lose. Oh, it's over here. By the way, I'm out exploring, trying to find Rex so that we can get some more precious resources. So you sort of touched on the inconsistencies, and I think, for instance, there's things like sometimes a player joins after, if I'm a host and I've been playing for an hour and I have a friend come and join me, they may join and run around, and they won't see like the resources that I've already collected. They'll kind of see like the hole in the terrain, but they may see the nuggets that are the nuggets that are sort of still there floating on the surface, even though they can't collect them. They may see, for instance, a shuttle that's crashed, or excuse me, the host will see a shuttle that's crashed, but the client might. And is all of that kind of stuff still weaved into the same thing that you're explaining about the terrain? And is that the same sort of issue going on?
Not really. The terrain is a very specific type of problem, a specific class of problem. Whereas a lot of those things, and also, so there's a lot of those discrepancies when you see some state of an object is different between the server and the client.
Mm-hmm.
That's more of that's just a simple bug in the way that we've written the network code for that object to guarantee that the state gets there. Maybe something was unreliable, a transmission was unreliable when it should have been more reliable, and maybe there was some bad network weather and there was a dropped packet and it didn't get there in time, or maybe there was two values that kind of rely on each other coming in a certain order and it didn't. And so those kind of are part and parcel with the way Unreal networking, the Unreal network data replication model is packaged out of the box. That lets you be very freeform, but it also lets you dig certain holes and create certain bugs for yourself. And so we just have to fix those on an object by object, case by case basis. There's another terrain. One of the terrain issues kind of falls into that class, which is that right now there's a join in progress process that you have to go through when you've joined somebody's game, and they have sculpted the whole surface of the terrain. They've changed a lot of things to do with the ground. When you join their game, you can generate the terrain the same way that they did at the beginning, but you won't have all their changes. And so the host will actually be transmitting a lot of the changes to the terrain as you drop in. It won't download the entire state of the entire planet, but it'll just download kind of what you can see when you drop in, and then as you move around, it's kind of constantly transmitting new data.
Yeah.
If there's change data.
Yeah, typically those things resolve themselves over time. I kind of experienced it when I first joined, because we have those white bubbly sort of package things that come in that look like a pyramid, and I noticed that when I approached it, the lid didn't fly off, and that would be because either you or Riley, before I joined, would have activated that already. And after I had left and come back to it later, I eventually saw the art had changed, which shows me that the lid had in fact. So there's just a bit of a catch up there. Are those sort of issues solvable issues, or is that just going to be a thing that we're going to be facing sort of?
They're all completely solvable. It just takes a lot of manpower, network engineering, and managing the correctness of all the game objects in multiplayer scenarios. It's always a pretty labor-intensive job. AAA Studios dedicated a lot of people to multiplayer engineering, and we had just me, humble old me who had never been a network engineer before this project, and I did it all essentially by myself. And I have to admit that I haven't been able to do nearly as much bug fixing since we launched as I would like to. So I did. I was on top of a lot of the crashes that we had, a couple dozen crash bugs that were severe enough to definitely want to fix. And I did a lot of those fixes in the first couple of weeks post-launch. But now that the game is much more stable in terms of crash stability, the quality of life issues, like the ones that you're talking about, we have to prioritize them. And part of my problem has been that I am also the guy who handles a lot of the administrative work to do with the company. And now that we are in a position, so we're in this position in the first couple of months after launch, where this is going to be the absolute slowest time in terms of development and pushing out new updates, simply because before launch, we're a very, very small team. Before launch, we were 100% dedicated to development, and we really kind of left all the administrative stuff on the floor. Post-launch, with money from the game coming in, now we actually owe taxes. We're going to be hiring employees. We need to do proper payroll. There's kind of a small mountain of paperwork to make sure that all our registrations and licensing and insurance and everything is put together. We're moving into a new building to house the people that we're hiring. We just hired a person, and we'll have to talk about that soon. So there's been a ton of overhead that it's really front loaded right now, and that's taken up almost all of my time. But a lot of that's going to calm down. We're getting a lot of that work done, and in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be able to spend a lot more of my time back on development. Mm-hmm. And we're also, a lot of what we've been doing is interviewing and hiring and putting new people in place to accelerate our development. Yeah, but there's so we're, the sooner we do that, the faster we're going to be ultimately. It's just that in the intervening time, it does take up a lot of our time.
Yeah, and I think we're still. So that brings up a good point, is that we are still dedicated to patching it. And to talk about the patch schedule a little bit, I think right now we're average anywhere somewhere falls between a week and 2 weeks. Every week or 2 weeks we tend to patch. And like you said, with the game coming out, now we have a lot more sort of business overhead that we have to face. And just so people know that are watching us, because there's a lot of people that are watching us right now, we are System Era. There's only 6 of us right now at the company, plus a couple of contractors that are helping us. So we wear a lot of hats. Like Brendan was saying, that he's a programmer that had to focus on multiplayer, which he had never done. And now that those things are out of the way, now he focuses on the business side of things. He's our de facto GM, and killing it right now. So that ends up pulling away time from the game. But that's a great problem for us to have, and we are working to get over that right now. So like Brendan was saying, we are moving to a larger office. We are growing our team. We've already started making hires of new people that are coming through. I don't want to die again. Just 1 second. Oh no, I'm definitely gonna die again. Shit. Oh, maybe not. Come on.
So yeah, I mean, we're basically slowing down so that we can speed up later.
Right. And I think people that are adopters of what we're doing here, hopefully there's that understanding that things are going to go a little slow right now, and just to be patient. But we are 100% committed to this game. I've seen a couple of questions in the chat that ask about sort of who are we, not who are the people that are playing right now, but who is System Era. And System Era is actually a company that is comprised of all former AAA developers, except for some of the new people that we're bringing on now. So myself, I worked on the Assassin's Creed franchise, Watch Dogs. I was assistant art director at Ubisoft. Brendan and Zabir worked on the Halo franchise at 343. Zabir's also got a huge background with the Unreal Engine. Riley comes from Disney. And he's worked on films and stuff as an audio designer. And then Paul, 343, Valve, id Software. Jacob was from 343 on the Halo franchise. So we are seasoned developers. But we are also facing challenges that we just never faced before from the AAA scene. So we have to kind of get through these little hurdles to get back to the product, and that's what we're in right now. But that doesn't mean that we're not focused on the game. Like I said, we just put out a patch a few days ago. We have more that's coming through. We actually just teased a bit of new content on our Twitter that's coming out, some art updates. On my end right now, there is a lot of terrain discrepancy, some seams and stuff like that, but that's okay. We sort of touched on those a little bit. So yeah, so there's a lot of T's that need to be crossed and I's that need to be dotted on the business side, so that we can keep going through. But that's only really one or two persons' main focus right now. The rest of the team is focused on bugs and content. Okay, so I'm coming back with a bunch of research stuff. I don't know how it's going at the base for you guys. Do we have a vehicle by chance? Otherwise, I'm just going to...
I'm building a vehicle bay right now.
Okay, if once the vehicle's ready, if we go west and follow that tether line, there's... Right at the end of the tether line, there's 2 more research items. So, we've talked a bit about some multiplayer discrepancies. I would like to keep touching on multiplayer issues.
I think that we should actually talk about performance a little bit while we have the time.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, and I was going to kind of hand that off to Zabir. I was going to say that probably the biggest complaint that we've had outside of people being unable to launch due to those C++ redistributable issues is performance degradation over time, which is the issue that we are most focused on resolving on the engineering side right now. And I think Zabir has been doing most of the legwork there. We've been working together on that, but he's been the one writing the code because, like I said, I've been mired in paperwork. So
Yeah.
I think Zabir should talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
So just before you jump in, Zabir, really quickly, just to summarize what we're about to talk about is, especially Xbox users, I think you'll have noticed that as time goes on, your performance, your frames, they drop. That is a known issue. That's something that we're focused on, and Zabir is going to sort of elaborate on that. Go ahead, Zabir.
Yeah. So the main reason why performance drops as you keep playing the game is a lot of the game was written sort of like exploratorily. I mean, the game design isn't fully baked, and you want to try things out and you want to experiment with things. So a lot of times things aren't optimally laid out. One of those things is the streaming system. So right now the game doesn't quite unload things that it should. So as you explore the entire world, there are tons of things that that we're spawning into place that we're not despawning. For probably the last 3 weeks or so, I've been working on trying to get the scaffolding for a spawning or a streaming system in place. What that'll allow us to do is essentially stream out things that are no longer relevant to the player. Like, so all the trees and the fodder and all the grass and all those kind of things and the resource nuggets and things like that. When they're no longer in view, we'll be able to start streaming those out. That will mean a huge performance boost for the lower end machines. So just to throw out some numbers, when I started this work and I had played for maybe about 2 hours or so, there were about 20,000 actors or items that the game engine was having to track and make sure that they were all synchronized and whether they need to be rendered and whether physics need to run on them and something like that. Yes, it was almost 20,000.
Sorry, Zabir, just really, really quickly. Somebody's driving around me right now in a Rover, and I can't see who it is. Oh, it's Riley.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. There was like a driverless Rover driving by. It's actually kind of funny. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, and so now with some of the streaming changes that I'm prototyping and putting in, after about an hour's worth of play, there's only about 2,000 or so. 2,000 or so actors that the engine is having to track, right? So that's a whole order of magnitude reduction. In the first pass, we're targeting mainly kind of like a lot of the fodder that you see out in the
decorators.
The game, like all the grass. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The decorators, like a lot of the cube patches and things like that.
So a lot of just so the viewers know, it's a lot of the stuff that's on my screen right now. It's all the grass.
Yeah, exactly. That is what dominates almost everything. And so that's where a lot of the performance issues have come from. Is that our streaming system is not quite equipped to deal with the scale of the game that we have. The reason it's taking a while is that it's the code is quite tricky to write in such a way that we don't break people's save files. Mm-hmm. We found that people are far more attached to their save games than we anticipated. Yep. So if we could, we would like to keep your save file working, right? So that makes the job a little bit harder, but at the same time, that means that hopefully you'll just transparently see the benefits once we are able to roll out the patch.
Okay, I'm just going to quickly throw up a little asterisk on what Zabir just said. We are trying our hardest not to break everybody's save games, but especially while we're in this sort of pre-alpha phase, don't get too personally attached to your save games, because there may be a rollout that we just didn't anticipate having such an impact on code or design that may just end up breaking your save games. You're probably going to hate it. It sucks, but that's just sort of a part of the process that we're going to have to go through. So we are doing our damnedest to make sure that doesn't happen, because we know it's pretty crappy. But especially now that we're in pre-alpha, always have it in the back of your head that you may lose this save game. But luckily, if I do say so myself, I think the very beginning of the game is still really fun and compelling. So if you have to go back and restart, hopefully you still can have some fun doing that. But fingers crossed we don't have to hit you guys with something like that.
Yeah. I guess the other thing I'll just touch on is,
sure.
If we do break your save file, we will definitely try to make it worth it, right? Like when we do break your save file, hopefully there will be a big change. And the reason we're doing it is that a huge percentage of users will see a real big benefit, right? So
we're not just going to put some trivial thing in there that might break it. We'll have a pretty compelling reason to do that. I just want to just to elaborate there. So Zabir, this is going to move. We're going to do it with the grass, which is what I'm sort of looking at now on my screen. But we are going to move that into vehicles and base modules and power lines and all that kind of stuff. So we're starting small, kind of like what we do normally. But you see this you guys are wizards to me, so I'll call it a spell. You see these spells being cast across pretty much all the components in the game, but we're just sort of starting with the biggest offender, which is the decorators. Is that fair to say?
That's right. Yeah, and some of the things will be more complicated. Like, so for instance, if you think about the energy, the network that we have, right? Like how the power grid actually works. You can stretch a tether network all the way around the planet, and you can have a battery at your base, right? So, and the battery is feeding you power through the tether network halfway around the world. So we need to really think about, well, what does streaming something out like that mean, right? Like if you go halfway around the world and we stream out your battery, we're no longer tracking its state, right? We're no longer able to like decrement how much power it has and actually carry the power through the tether lines. So to think about how.
Zabir, you just kind of cut out for me for a second there.
Sorry, am I back?
Yeah. It sounded like you're being teleported to another dimension.
Zabir is transmitting from the backwoods of Michigan right now. I think he's on a are you on 28.8 modem, right, Zabir?
That's right. Yeah. No, I'm visiting my parents in Michigan, so I'm on not the best internet right now.
Two cans and some string.
Yeah, but basically, long story short, some of the particular things, especially like the tether network and the power grid system, will require a little bit of a thought on how we build a streaming system around it, right? Because they're sort of live entities constantly, right? Like whereas the grass is essentially effectively dead if you're not near it. But something like a tether network or a battery is kind of live like 24/7, right? Like it always needs to sort of function. So we really need to think about how we potentially change the game design to maybe allow for more streaming capabilities and things like that.
Yeah. So I just actually faced a bug with a rover. I really want to talk about rovers because a lot of people are experiencing issue with rovers. I think just vehicles in general. So what happened on my end, and the streamers would have seen that, or the viewers would have seen this on the stream. I took the rover that Riley made. I followed my tether line out to this little forest area that I found that has a bunch of research items. I parked my rover at the end of the tether line. Oh, it's doing a dance right now. I walked away to get a resource item. When I came back, my rover was sort of jiggling, and then it settled into the ground a little bit. And now it's like halfway stuck into the ground. It looks like it's being grabbed by a sandworm, which we don't have in the game. Now it just resolved itself. So what's going on? What's going on with the rovers in that case? Like, is it an issue of the terrain being pulled LOD or lowering its level of detail, and then it's trying to solve inside of that? Is it completely physics issue? Let's use this as a segue to talk about rovers. So in that scenario, what would be going on here?
I'll talk about that a bit. Yeah, I mean the rovers are pretty bad, kind of top to bottom. totally aware of a lot of those issues. The thing with them kind of falling through the ground, that was we continually try to improve that, but that's in general caused by the fact that when you get far enough away, the terrain down reses, and we stop having collision on it. And so when you get far enough away from something, we have to turn off its physics, otherwise it'll fall through the world because there's nothing to collide against underneath it.
Right.
And there were definitely bugs where the physics for an object and the gravity for an object would turn on too soon as you return to it, and it would actually start to fall before the terrain collision was ready as it came back in. We've improved some of that. I think it's possible to still get it to happen. I think we generate collision a couple of LOD levels out, so sometimes you can get the physics activating, and it's the object starts to collide against sort of LOD 1, as it were, as opposed to LOD 0.
And just so people know, LOD stands for level of detail.
Level of detail, right? So like as you get far away from meshes in games, a lot of times they'll kind of change so that there's fewer polygons to make them cheaper to render and handle. And so the terrain is doing this constantly, and there's many levels that it goes through. And so, it was an issue of the physics. It's always an issue of the physics activating a little early, and in this case, it can sometimes activate against collision generated for one level of detail lower than is the kind of high detail that you walk on. And then when the high detail terrain comes in, it can actually the object can be clipping into the ground, and it might, in some cases, if it's an extreme enough change, force it below the ground instead of above. And I think in general, we just need to completely kind of revamp how we're sleeping physics, and so that never happens. It's a solvable problem, and we'll definitely get get it solved.
Okay. Now, is that so? The next issue that we see a lot with rovers is they just kind of they do a bit of that freaking out, but they kind of do it in the sky, and they look like they're being like teleported in between multiple dimensions, and then they whiz around, and they'll go taking off, or they'll flip around. Is that related to what you're describing, or is that something completely separate?
That is, I think that's completely separate. Well, I know that that's completely separate, but it often manifests more often on a client machine because the clients will often have a position correction. So it's just the way the rovers are set up. Like we kind of, there's a lot of cool code in Unreal, like for vehicles that we kind of didn't use at all because it's not ready out of the box to work on a spherical world where gravity can be in any direction. And
right.
So we kind of just built our own stuff, and it seems like it should work, but there are clearly some issues that we're not handling with to do with the physics constraints between the wheels and the body of the rover, where if there's a sudden change in position, then it can just get into an unstable state where there's a bad value, like an infinity in a position or a rotation value, and it just kind of starts to go crazy.
Okay. And is that so? This, I guess, what you were describing earlier with the terrain issue and the collision and the level of detail being sort of brought down to the next level, is that the same issue that's going on where somebody will park a vehicle, they'll go far away from it, and they'll come back and the vehicle's gone? And what my understanding is that it's actually fallen through the terrain and it might be down in a cave or something, right? Like that's
the same issue. The vehicle hasn't vanished from the world. It's probably just fallen through it. And it might, if there's a cave below, it might be below. It depends on the actual geometry, the exact geometry that was around you, and what had collision and what didn't at the time.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and I guess I'll mention another thing. So Brendan and I have talked about this, and I think the way we're going to try and target this problem is on how we reactivate objects and reactivate their physics. This will allow us to prevent things from falling, right? Because as you're approaching, it thinks it needs to wake up and start, having physics on it again. And unfortunately, the terrain isn't quite there yet. So, yeah, it is a solvable problem. And I think we have some ideas on how to get it fixed.
Sure. Okay.
Speaking of that just literally happened to the rover. I took it out, ran away from it, and it's nowhere to be found anymore.
A lot of these problems actually stem from having a spherical world. And when you have, if you're building a custom engine from the ground up, you can handle that no problem. But a lot of the out-of-the-box engines, you'd be surprised at how much code completely assumes that the world is not round. It's just a square plane. It's just a square box or plane, and gravity is always down, and up is always up. 001.
Yeah.
Vector. It's like that's kind of baked into everything, and sure. So if you don't want that, you kind of write it yourself, and you get all the other attendant issues.
And I'll ask this question sort of with everything that we talk about. Is this a solvable issue? It sounds like it may just be another manpower issue for us.
I mean, my answer to that in my entire professional career is that all issues are solvable. Right. Solvable issues. I mean, except for the laws of physics. But it's just a matter of time, time and manpower.
And from a programming side, I mean, from my side, which is of a person that plays the game mostly and does art, so I don't really have a lot of impact on code. Are these issues a priority for us?
Oh, they're a huge priority.
Okay, great. I think people just want to know where they stand in terms of our development schedules and things like that. So,
as far as my personal development priorities, I don't have anything on the horizon other than fixing these issues. When I get back to coding.
Yeah.
And exactly. Then, I think we have enough foundational pieces that Jacob, you, and Paul can keep cranking on content and just making that stuff better, and then Brendan and I can really focus on a lot of the quality of life improvements and the bugs on the engine side.
Yeah, so they get to be the noble creative poets, whose minds spring the lush, verdant experience of the game. We get to be the Morlocks, working in the boiler room underneath everything, making it all run.
Yeah, that's
the team dynamic, by the way.
Yeah. No, we love you guys. That's not right. Um, yeah,
So-
one more thing on vehicles really quickly I want to touch on, and I know that this is not related, this is more of an art and collision issue, but a lot of people have expressed disdain, I think is the right way to put this, for the fact that the rovers just kind of clip on everything that gets in their way. They have a really small sort of threshold of things they can get over. That's a fairly trivial issue for us to fix. That as Paul is going back and sort of redesigning and updating the visuals for the rovers, he and Jacob can focus on how do they feel, how big are the wheels, what kind of threshold of things can they get over. So those things will be solved for sure over time as we go through. Obviously, we don't want it to be a big pain in the ass to drive over little tiny pebbles and things like that. That's why, I don't know if you noticed, but actually a lot of the stuff in the ground doesn't have collision. So the cubes that I've got spawning on terrain, or the stalagmites and the stalactites in the caves, a lot of them, except for like the large one that you might see in the middle of a scattering of them, a lot of those don't have a collision, and that's because those are problems that we'll solve in the future to get over. So we know that that's annoying, and we'll get those fixed. I promise. Sorry,
Yeah.
Zabir, it sounded like maybe I interrupted you. You had a point that you wanted to make there.
No, I think no. I mean, you covered almost all of it. I guess I will mention this is a little bit again, no promises. But one of the things we noticed is that some of the so we use Unreal Engine and it runs on PhysX. And starting with the newer version of I think it's Unreal 4.15, they moved a lot of the vehicle code into a plugin. And what that might allow us to do is make it even more editable to our needs. Like Brendan mentioned, the up vector and the down vector, gravity vector, it's used to be kind of hard coded. With that kind of refactor that Epic did, it might make it so that we could leverage a lot more of Epic's vehicle code that's already built into the engine. Because right now it's all a custom solution. And so if we're able to leverage a lot of the code that they've kind of refactored, we might see wholesale a lot of things get better very quickly.
Okay, great.
And just kind of on the topic of the vehicles real quick, while you guys were talking about it, I was driving my vehicle back to the base and it spazzed out and went into space. And I crashed. So.
Oh, and you crashed. Oh, so we hit you with a double whammy there.
Yeah, so I'll send you that crash dump, Brennan. But yeah, that's the way it goes, and we'll fix that.
Yeah. So actually, Riley, while I have your attention, why don't we talk a little bit some audio stuff that we've noticed?
Yeah.
So one of them that I'm experiencing that I have experienced, and I think there's this overall high level issue that we have to solve which is just making multiplayer as consistent between host and client as possible. And I think the audio stuff falls into there as well. And as an example, right now I can hear, like where I am in the world right now and on this planet, if somebody's back at the base and does some researching at the research module, I will hear that. I'll hear the audio effects that you've made go off and stuff like that. I won't see the pop up for what was researched. So there's some weird stuff going on there. Are issues like that, where I'm hearing audio that I probably shouldn't be hearing because I'm too far away. Is that like a per item basis, or is that like it just requires one? And the programmers are going to hate me, but one spell that they have to cast to kind of fix all this kind of stuff, or is it just like we have to go through the items individually and just make sure that they are sort of on the network properly?
It might be there could always be a way of like doing a one brushstroke fix for it, but on this issue, I think it's like almost all those audio issues are related to where Unreal is basically telling the audio to be played off, and it's probably a per object fix. So like with that research thing, it's basically playing the sound from your body and not from the object.
I see. Okay.
And so that's why a lot of these problems happen. Like another example is like damage. So if since Brennan's the host and you and I get damaged, it's actually going to play our damage audio off of his body.
Yeah. Because
of that player, whatever the player blueprint is, it's saying, okay, play damage, and even though it's not playing off the client. So that's why there's a lot of finicky and wonky things going on with audio right now. Is it's playing not off the object but off of where the player body is. And so I need to either touch those up, and also what I'm actually working on a little bit right now is shifting the whole audio engine not to be playing off of Unreal, and I'm going to switch to Wise real quickly.
Yeah.
Which is it's going to make everything way more robust and way more easy. Wise also has a lot of more. We can track the performance of the audio, how things are getting triggered, so I can actually have a lot more knowledge of what the problems are without having to ask a programmer to look at it. So that also alleviates a lot of these issues. Like another one that's happening, I don't know if it's happening on yours, it's definitely happening on mine right now, is when you go back to base, you hear the printing looping sound on all the platforms. I don't know if you're hearing that.
I actually thought I heard the wind vane.
No, this is like a cacophonous like sound.
I thought that was the wind vane spinning. It sounds like the same audio to me.
Nope. It's what it is the audio loop that plays when you print a building. And what's happened, I think, on there is it's stuck in a on state, and the off never gets triggered. So I don't know the exact fix for Unreal, since I'm still I'm new-ish with the audio engine on Unreal, but with Wise, we would just say at a certain distance when you leave that parameter, it just kills it. It just turns it off and either holds it into a virtual voice state or re-instances it when you get back into it. In this state, we would just say, yeah, you're just turned off forever. Like, we don't need to hear that sound. So, what's happening is when you go back into the range, it's playing it again, which is bad. So that's another really annoying one that I want to fix.
Okay. I just had a couple issues come up that I want to quickly ask the guys about. So I was out on a rover about 5 minutes ago. The people on the stream saw this, and I think I saw a couple comments about it. I had dug up some compound, and I had no more room left on my backpack, so it spit the nugget out at the back of the tool. But I couldn't pick it up after that. It was just this thing that I could get the selection when I went over top of it. I couldn't shift click to grab it. I couldn't grab it to put it in my backpack. Brendan or Zabir, and I know people have sort of experienced that, where I know the solution is that Brendan, since you're the host, you'd have to come to me and pick that up for me. What's going on there? Can you talk a little bit about that issue?
I mean, that's a class of issue where the physical state, which determines whether or not you're allowed to pick something up, for whatever reason, your machine did not get the event that changed that state from slotted to simulating in the world, and so I can't remember. That is a replicated variable. But it does change through various RPC calls. That's just a very specific issue, a very specific bug that we have to fix.
Okay.
In general, there's kind of a process issue when it comes to building multiplayer games. That we are learning because we're fairly new at it. We're not multiplayer experts. Which is that you obviously, and this is the tried and true wisdom, is you have to build for multiplayer from the ground up. And a lot of the game as we were building it. And a lot of the way the object logic was coded was really for single player, and we started to work on multiplayer a bit after the fact once we realized we would have the schedule to attempt it. But the process is still sort of that things get prototyped and implemented in a sort of single player sandbox, and then they get polished up for multiplayer, which is a bit of a difficult way to do it. It really adds to your work, and I think that one of the process changes that we're trying to make is to really be multiplayer first, as you're coding the logic for any given new object type. You have to start thinking about if anybody in the audience is like, does enterprise kind of web programming or whatever, you might be familiar with MVC, MVCS, like that model view controller paradigm. When you have, which is sort of the same situation as a typical Unreal client server model, where you have some authoritative host who's actually changing state, and then you have these client views that don't really want to change state, but they need to look at the state to present what's on the screen. When you're writing a single player game, there isn't any kind of such concept. Everything is the state, the view, the controller, which is the machine actually changing the state. That's all just jumbled together. But when you're looking at multiplayer, you have to kind of think of the host as both possessing the model and being the controller to change it, and then the clients as being just views who receive state, but can't really alter it. And so you have to kind of start coding in that paradigm from the beginning. One of the ways I think that we're going to do that is as we do dedicated server support. We really want to add dedicated servers. our repertoire of things that people will have access to.
Yeah.
And doing them will also enable a kind of development paradigm where we can always run the game from the client perspective without needing multiple machines or anything. We can just run a dedicated server locally, and then automatically connect to it, and then you can do all of our development and prototyping from the client's perspective to make sure that you're kind of dealing with server and client code all the time.
Okay. Oh shit.
Yeah.
Oh, I just hit two bugs in a row really quickly just to touch on. One, my rover flew away. People saw that. That hurts. That hurts a lot. I was actually trying to go out there and explore, and I hit a rock, and my rover just said, "You know what? I'm gonna peace out. I'm out of here."
Yeah. So I mean, if you want, I can kind of describe what just happened there. Yeah, I watched it and couldn't stop laughing. Basically, like if you think about how a game simulates, it's simulating a frame at a time, right? Like it's basically like kind of like taking a picture like super fast, kind of like exactly like a movie, right?
Right.
And every snapshot, the vehicle moves a certain direction, and so inevitably what happens is that the vehicle will move into a terrain or into the rock, and the physics system will try to apply an opposite force to try to push it out of the rock or push it out of the terrain. And the angle at which you touch the rock, it ended up applying such an immense amount of force to push you out of the rock. It just sent your rover flying, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of those things is that because we kind of have our own hand-rolled vehicle, you end up seeing a lot of this, right? Like when I was working at Epic Games, right? We had maybe 2 or 3 engineers full time that would work on vehicles, and when they would work on it, they would work 3 weeks or so at a time, like really tuning it and making sure it was really, really top notch. And so that's one of those things that exactly, basically you penetrated a little bit, it decided it needed to apply a way too much of a force to push you back out, and it just sent it launch, into space.
Yeah, there's also I think what happens like when it actually when it actually does the space launch there, there's some sort of positive feedback loop that happens where there's too much force applied to one of the wheels. The wheels are connected to the body via the physics constraint, and the solver for the constraints just gets into a feedback loop and goes ballistic, and it's going to especially happen at lower frame rates. So it really compounds everything. One thing is bad and everything just gets worse.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other issue I faced, which has happened twice now, that somebody's leaving. Who's leaving?
That's me.
Oh, see you later. And my performance dropped when you did that. So I've died twice now on the stream, and both times I went back to the base, I put me in the ground, and I did the thing where you float through the void and you can see all that kind of stuff. What's going on there? Is that just the spawn location where the character is just too far into the terrain? Is there something else that's happening that you guys can talk about?
That was simply that you teleported. I mean, yeah, when you die, you teleported back to the main base, and the main base's terrain just hadn't spawned in yet.
Okay.
That's why you kind of fell through, and so
fair enough. So
yeah,
it would just be a matter of, I
issue.
guess, maybe adjusting the player spawn location to be a little higher, or something like solving it so the terrain comes in a little faster before that happens.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, and you kind of touched on that, right? Like, it's going to be a multi-prong approach, right? One of the things we can do is, of course, optimize how fast we generate terrain, right? Improve the streaming system and all that, right? So those will get us part of the way there. And then the other side of it is, when we spawn you in, try to set you up for the most success. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And that kind of leads me into another issue that I wanted to quickly touch on. This is not that much of a breaker, but it's kind of the same thing about where the player spawns, and that is the bug that some people will have where they'll put a resin in their base node, it'll come out, they'll put 2 more resin in to build the platform, and because of the location that they're standing in, the platform kind of spawns in, and now they're stuck inside of it. And that's kind of the same issue of just like the spawn location not being in the best spot. That maybe we can detect that and move the player out when
That's mostly us being pretty sloppy.
Okay.
And just not even bothering to look for the player's position.
Okay. So
yeah,
the solution there is just be less sloppy. Is that the best way to say that?
Yeah, basically, right when we're about to spawn the platform or whatever, right, we need to do a bunch of shape checks to make sure that you're not intersecting with where we're about to spawn it, right? And if you are going to be intersecting, we need to just like push you out slowly.
I just died and I'm standing right beside the base because I'm trying to listen to what Zabir's saying. Damn it. Okay, great. So we're just at the hour mark. So let me just go through some of the ones that were really quick to talk about, and then we'll end it. What happens when I see a friend playing online, and I go to connect to them, and I don't join? What are some of the? I know that's such a broad thing that there could be a lot of things, but why don't we talk about a couple of them? What would be stopping me from connecting to a friend that maybe I can work on so that I can connect to them?
So first, it depends on is it that you're never able to connect to them, or is it just that this time you're not able to connect to them, but other times, like maybe if you wait an hour or something and you try again later, then you can.
I mean, personally, with my experiences, and I've told you guys about this before, where it just seems to be, it feels like it's a timing thing. Like I haven't timed out or something like that, but because we're peer to peer and maybe as a host that person shut their machine down, that makes me think that maybe it isn't a timeout issue. But again, I'm not a coder here, so you can mention that. A lot of it does feel time based.
Yeah, so if it's a permanent thing, you can just never connect to your friend. Then either you're not their friend, or and they just don't like you. No, but like I mean, meaning you actually make sure that you actually are friends in the friends lists.
Yeah, on Steam Friends and Xbox. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, because there's an interesting Steam issue first of all, where you can, if you look up somebody by name, you can join them. You can get that join button, regardless of whether you're friends, even if they are in a game that specifies sort of a friends-only lobby. And that was an interesting bug that we had close to launch, where streamers were complaining that randoms were like dropping in their game and stealing their stuff.
Yeah.
And so we fixed that issue by essentially having the game itself check on join and rejecting non-friends in when it's doing the session handshake, rather than relying on the platform. But you still do get that button, and so it is still possible to look up somebody by name, see their sort of profile on Steam, and hit that join, and then you're not actually friends, so it's never going to let you join.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure you're friends. The other thing is there are firewall issues that can happen sometimes. Make sure your firewall is configured to let Astroneer through. It should automatically generate an exception. Often when you run the game the first time and you get that little prompt that says, "Hey, the Astroneer wants access to your network. Do you want to let it?" Make sure you say yes. If you say no, it's not going to add the firewall exception rule for Astroneer. It's not going to let anybody.
Riley, you're such a troll. Sorry.
And what else? So then those are the permanent things. If there's a temporary thing where it's like you can connect most of the time, but then this time you just couldn't. There's a couple things that it can be. One is make sure that you guys are on the same version. If two people with different versions of the game will never be able to actually connect to each other. You'll join and it'll try to join, and then it'll join the session. But when it actually tries to get into the game, the Unreal Handshake code is going to reject based on the version mismatch.
Okay.
So make sure you're on the same versions. That like every time we release a patch, we get a higher volume of emails saying, "Hey, we can't connect," and that's generally due to people being temporarily on mismatched versions.
Right.
And it's especially true on the Xbox and Windows 10 versions, because unlike on Steam, which you can kind of force download the new update, on those platforms, it's a rolling update. You don't really control when you get it. You'll just get it, within a few hours. And so there's always going to be a period of time when some of the population has one version, some of the population has the other version. And then finally, there are issues. There are timeout issues sometimes on Steam. Steam tracks, who's playing with who in their session management. And so normally if you exit a game, we're supposed to be good programmers and report to Steam that players exited the session and that we can tear down the session. But sometimes if there was a crash or a sudden termination of the process, then there will be no notification. And Steam will think that you are still in a game session with somebody. And if it thinks that you're still in a session with somebody, that's the person that you're trying to join, then that can disrupt the attempt to actually successfully join. And you just have to wait for the timeout to happen. And maybe there's some things that we can do there. I haven't really looked into it yet, but we could probably do some things there to improve that behavior, shorten the timeouts, something like that.
Okay. Great. That's good. That's good to know. Riley, you're such a troll. You're not going to kill me. Get out of here. He's putting seeds in my backpack right now, hoping that they expand and kill me.
I saw someone do that.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out how it happened.
Just get the hell out of here, man. Okay, so what is going on with those broken planets that look like gumballs that got dropped on the floor? When they split open and you can kind of see the layers, what's happening there?
No idea yet.
Yeah, so I can hazard a guess, but yeah, I don't know for sure. It's been that has probably been a much lower priority for us because it does look stupid, but it's not.
It's
It
functional.
doesn't impact immediately, right? Yeah, my guess is that there's either some sort of floating point imprecision issue. So basically, the four chunks are getting slightly different positions, and so it causes them to kind of split apart, and that's when you can kind of see the seams. Yeah, that would sort of be my guess, is that they are essentially, if you think about them as four independent pieces getting updates from the server. If one of the updates gets missed or is behind, then you would expect one of the pieces to move ahead while the other one is slightly further behind, and that's
Right.
when you start to see them split apart.
What might happen is that there are four. It's got those eight. Those eight. When you're looking at those proxy planets in the distance, they're basically 8 chunks. And there's a process that runs that will build the geometry for each of the 8 chunks. And there might be some threading timing issue where the geometry corresponding to a chunk is just getting mixed up in the order, and we're assigning the wrong geometry to a particular node, octree terrain node, and so they just we invert the order for some reason, and then it looks like a sliced up grapefruit.
Okay, so but stuff like this isn't exactly our top priority because it's not visually it looks dumb, but it doesn't break anybody's experience. So we that's how we prioritize these things. Stuck in base platforms we talked about.
There was one that I think is just another client server issues. I guess people were experiencing issues where they would travel to another planet, build out a base, and then like a friend would join, and that stuff wouldn't be there.
Mm-hmm.
Like the conduits and base platforms.
Sure.
But I think that's just another goof on us.
Yeah. Okay, so we've hit the hour mark. So Zabir, Brendan, and Riley, if you guys want to, feel free to go back to work, or if you want to stay, that's totally cool. There was 2 more things that I wanted to ask about. If you guys don't mind, I could ask them. Otherwise, we could end this and I could just talk with the chat for another 15 minutes. What do you guys want to do? Do you want to answer a couple more?
Well, I'm free for the next hour or so I can keep going.
So the only other 2 things I wanted to bring up, and I can see in the chat that people are asking questions. Most of them aren't really about issues, but we could maybe go to those ones in a second. The thing with partial nuggets, and so just so you guys know, let me just sort of illustrate what I mean by that. What a nugget is, and we can sort of talk about those. So this thing that I'm grabbing is what we would call a nugget. This one's organic, and you'll notice as you collect them, it kind of goes and builds it out, and as you spend it, it goes and it gets spent. And we don't want it to be a scenario where you're ever managing those when they're in partial states. So if you spend 50% of it, we don't want it to just be this thing that's 50% there and now you have to manage it. It's binary. It's either a full nugget or an incomplete nugget. But sometimes players will come across nuggets that are partial and selectable, and they're basically completely useless. Is there anything that we need to know about these things that are relevant, or is it just like, yeah, we'll just fix that? Unfortunately, it loses a nugget. Is there anything that Brendan or Zabir, you guys could quickly mention on that?
I mean, we'll fix it. The details of the problem are probably pretty technical with relating to how Unreal does what they call replicated variables. And my guess is what's happening there is that the value for how much of the resources is in that nugget is changing over time, and the changes are getting replicated to the client. But the last change, that change from non-zero to 0, doesn't get through for whatever reason. In that one case, like there's a packet drop in the network.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get through. And replicated variables in Unreal by default use an unreliable model. And the idea, the only contract is, hey, the value will eventually get get there as things keep changing. But there can be situations where the value didn't actually get there, and then the value stops changing, and the host will stop sending because it doesn't think it has any more changes. And I think that's the state that we get into.
Okay. That's a great answer. And then the long one, or the last one, which is that I wanted to touch on, because these are ones that I would say, like the ones that we've talked about in this stream, which I'm surprised we got through in the hour. So good job to the other three of you for getting through this with me. And I have never actually experienced it myself, so I don't know the context of how it happens, but we've certainly seen a lot of great images. What is going on when somebody's using the conduits, they're pulling it out between base modules or their rover, and all of a sudden they've got 8 of them, and it kind of looks like some weird space alien thing from science fiction and stuff like that. It ends up being this sort of wild, crazy conduit thing, or I think it might even happen with the winches I might have seen. Any insight on that, or is that just one of those things that we'll just have to investigate and get a patch out for?
I'm not sure why it would look like there's a whole like large number of them coming out.
Yeah,
but,
it's like some weird crazy Hydra.
If you ever see something that looks like it's stretching off into space, stretching off way into the distance, that's often literally because it thinks it's stretching to infinity. Like one of the points is just gone. It's not a number, and it's just going way off into space, and so it's just a bad value in the position data.
Okay.
As far as why there would be 8 coming out of like one node or something, that is unknown right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to hazard a guess, I think what's happening is, again, it comes back to network state not getting across, right? Like if you start pulling out one of the conduits while really on the server somebody's already pulled the conduit out, eventually that message will arrive to you, and now you've pulled out
right.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And if this kind of like carries on with each other, right? Like you can end up, pulling out way more than you actually should have been able to, right? So it is just something that we need to go back through and really tighten up the networking code, so to speak.
Okay. I thought you were going to say tighten up the graphics, and I was going to kick you out of this chat.
Well, we do need to tighten up the graphics on level 3.
Okay. Okay, guys, that's it. That's it for the questions I wanted to ask specifically. For everybody watching the stream, this stream was all about the bugs that are the most common issues that we're seeing, and we really wanted to, I wanted to see if I could find them and face them myself, so people watching knew what they might have looked like. But B, we also we took the stuff that's happening on the forum, the Steam forum, our forum, Twitter, all that stuff, and we compiled a list of the most common ones. A huge thank you to Wivarius and the mod team for helping out with that. And we wanted to talk about them. So for those of you that are tuning in now, this will be saved as a video on demand that you can go back and watch, and I'll eventually kick it over to YouTube on our YouTube channel. But just to run through really quickly some of the issues that we've talked about so that you guys can go back and watch it later. The first thing right off the top is we ended up talking about the C++ redistribution error that a lot of you are getting with, or not a lot of you, but we hear a lot about. I think Zabir mentioned that our estimate is only about 2% of people are actually affected by this, but because there's so many versions of the game out there now, I just died on the stream, but that's fine. That a lot of people are facing it. So we talked a bit about that and what we're doing to work on that. We've also talked about a lot of stuff about vehicles. Why do vehicles disappear? Why do they fly off into space? Why do they kind of like teleport and jiggle around really quickly and look super crazy? We talked about their physics. Why are they sort of hitting rocks a little too easily? They're kind of a pain in the ass to drive sometimes. We talked about multiplayer inconsistencies. So myself as a client, I'm seeing things that Brennan's not seeing, who's the host. And by the way, this whole session that we've been doing, I'm on the East Coast of North America, and Brennan is on the West Coast. So we have been playing multiplayer this whole time. I'm a client connecting to there. So just to give you an idea of what the context is there. The big one that we also talked about is performance degradation over time. So a lot of you watching right now, you've probably experienced this thing with the game where as you play it and you build more and your base gets bigger, or you go and you explore and you see new things, that your frame rate just drops over time. That's a huge priority for us. Zabir is championing that right now. It's sounding like it'll probably be ready in maybe the next patch or two, not to commit you, Zabir, to anything. But we are on the cusp of it. But just like everything we do at System Era and with Astroneer, it's not going to be the whole solution right away. We're going to baby step our way to that, and that's just how we work because there's so few of us on the team. There's only 6 of us. We also talked a little bit about things like reasons why you might not be able to connect to a friend in multiplayer, why there might be, look at the size of this planet rolling by. Holy crap. Why there might be planets that you see that are kind of like inverted and they look like a dropped gumball and you can see the inside. We talked a little bit about audio issues. Again, that is part of the sort of inconsistent stuff that's happening over multiplayer. So if you're watching this and we haven't talked about your bugs, we'll come back and we'll talk about those another time. But for now, those are the big ones that everybody kind of experiences. There's going to be a lot of little specific things that are very like, first you have to do this, then you have to do this, then you have to do this, then the bug happens. And we'll dive into those another time, maybe just during a stream or something like that. But for now, we just wanted to do a small format live podcast so that we could talk about the bugs. Everybody watching... sorry, go ahead.
Don't quit yet. We got to go down the slope.
Oh, your dang slope here.
Yeah.
But to everybody watching, thank you so much for watching. Okay, I'm going to run this thing down, and then we're going to call it quits. Zabir and Brendan, thank you for joining me. I know you guys are really busy on performance and bug fixing and things like that. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to join me on this stream.
All right, let me save it real quick because I've been like spawning my spaceship way back where.
Okay, I'm about to run down this thing.
All right, hang on. Whoa, what do you mean run down? Slide down.
Slide down, whatever. Move down.
All right, hang on. Let me get up there too.
Brendan's up here.
All right, Brendan, you ready?
No, I just fell to my death.
Rip. Rest in peace, Brendan.
All right.
Oh, I gotta go, dude. I'm gonna die. I got 50% oxygen here.
All right, we'll get down there. All right, run back down real quick. Oh shit.
No, I'm just gonna go shake and bake.
No. It's got to be a race.
Oh, it's a race. Oh, okay. Okay, I got. Let me retop and then we'll go. Bum. Okay.
Let me top off. Give me that air.
Oh, I just took a spike.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah.
I
Alright,
think we have our new competitive multiplayer designer.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
All right,
No, this is the second thing that Riley's kind of like come up with that actually looks really fun and interesting.
Oh yeah. This is like my jam. All right, Zabir, count us down. I'll let you give the count.
All right.
First one to the base. First one to the habitat.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, and go. Okay.
Yeah.
3,
Yep.
2, 1, go.
Oh
no.
I'm dead for sure.
I'm dead.
I thought I could shortcut
0% success. We all died.
I thought I could do the Rainbow Star Road thing and Rainbow Star Road, the thing from Mario Kart, and cut the line by doing an epic jump. But no.
I made a little shortcut that you could have taken, but yeah, that was bad. All right, I guess next time.
Yeah, we'll maybe the next stream we'll just focus on these little silly things that you can do in the game. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching. Brennan, Zabir, and Riley, again, thank you guys for taking the time out of your schedule to join me on this stream. To everybody watching, we are at Astroneer Game on Twitter and Facebook. Follow us there. We're going to start doing some more streams pretty much bi-weekly. If it's not me streaming some art content or somebody else streaming something, we'll do something as a team like we did today. This was a short one, but that was intentional because we're super busy. But there's a look at the blog or at the bugs. Thank you so much for watching, and we will be back soon.
Cool.
Oh,
Thanks,
one
guys.
last quick question. Do you guys know anything about the zebra ball? I saw that mentioned. I don't know what that.
Never heard of it.